Welcome back to another RW podcast. Guys, it's February and Tim is back. So I'm real excited. Tim, how are things going on Patreon?
Really good.
Okay.
Really good. We got off to a big start right away. Kind of met my expectations, maybe exceeded them a little bit. And
Right.
we've had guys steadily trickling in. And I announced the other day that we actually are at the point where we have double the amount of guys in the second tier as the first tier. And usually with these things, you think that, okay, the most guys are going to be in the least expensive tier. And then as it gets more expensive, they're going to be less and less.
Right.
So it'd be, this kind of a curve when really it's like a bell curve. The other day we hit the point where we have double the amount of guys in the second tier as the first, and we haven't had anybody downgrade from
That's awesome.
second to first. Like it's only been up.
Good. What kind
all
of
things
content are
considered.
you doing?
I started trickling out some of the Fast Twist 270 videos and our 7mm08 Remington that we added to the 7mm Showdown series. Started getting that stuff out, the ladder testing on that sort of thing. And now I'm working on editing some stuff for the 6.8 Western that we tested. That project is completely done. The 7mm08 is completely done. The 270, I have the 130 grain ballistic tip done completely.
Mhm.
And the 170 grain burger, I have the load developed, but I haven't shot that at long range yet. And then I still need to do the Nosler 150 grain Accubon long range load development in its entirety, as well as the Barnes 155 LRX. So that's going to have to wait till spring for me to do that testing, but it's all coming. And then I'm also working on trying to do this Gordon's Reloading Tool deep dive class for the group. Everybody's super interested in that and clamoring for that. So I want it to be perfect. So it's taken me forever, but I think once I get that first one out of the way, I'll be able to produce the classes faster and, I won't feel as anxious about it.
Awesome. Well, shall we open this can of worms?
Yeah, let's get the rake out and start swatting that hornet's nest as best we can.
Okay. So
and see if we can break the internet.
that's the goal. About 2 months ago, I put out a poll, and I want to ask you this same question, Tim.
Okay.
Let's say you have a 270 Winchester with the same powder, same bullet, and you load it up to 65,000 PSI. So basically you're maxing it out, okay?
Okay.
Which rifle is going to be faster? A Browning X-Bolt with a 22-inch barrel or a Tikka T3X with a 22-inch barrel?
So same cartridge, same powder, same bullet, same barrel length. The only difference is the manufacturer of rifle?
Correct.
Which one's going to be faster? Neither. They're going to be the same.
Yep.
But the difference will be how much powder it takes to get to 65. So the only thing that'll be different is the charge weight.
Mm-hmm.
If everything else is equal. If brass is the same, everything else is the same. Just the charge weight will be different.
But I think there is a very common misconception that there are slow and fast barrels.
You want my take on that?
That's what we're here for.
Okay. Is everybody sitting down? Are we ready? There's no such thing as fast or slow barrels. Boom. There's no such thing. Now, there's a lot of different things that go into this. It's going to take a long time to peel this apart, and I like to talk a lot, so we'll do the best we can to simplify it. There's a ton of different contributing factors that go into so you're putting a finite amount of energy in a vessel, and then you're asking it for a velocity. Well, there's a lot of different things that go into what velocity is actually going to be generated from that amount of energy you put in the case. And there's a lot of different things. So I guess we'll start with combustion space. That's probably the biggest one. So you have your Tikka or your Browning in that example. Let's start with the Browning. So you have your Browning, you have whatever brass. Let's say you have Nosler brass. And you go into the Hornady manual, and you're like, okay, I'm going to load this Hornady bullet. I have this powder, and I'm going to work up a ladder test. So you load it up, and you work your way up to max charge, and you bring that to the range. And then you start shooting. Well, you have Nosler brass, which is made by Norma. which is the thickest in the industry. So now you're going to the range, you got this really thick brass, and you're using Hornady data, and they used Hornady brass, which is thin. So you have less combustion space than Hornady did by a lot.
Okay.
And you go out and start your testing, and you shoot your first charge weight, which is supposed to be 27 or let's say 3,000 feet per second. And right out of the gate, you get 3,100. You're already 100 feet a second over the book. And you're like, well, what's going on here? I must have a fast barrel. I must have a fast barrel. You keep working your way up. You get up towards max charge, and all of a sudden you're starting to get pressure signs, and maybe, you're relatively inexperienced, so you don't know what to look for. And you're way over what the max velocity is, and you're not even to the max charge yet, and you don't know. And pretty soon you get up to the top charge, and you're 100, 150 feet a second over the book, and the bolt's a little hard to open, but you're like, okay, well, I don't know, it's a new gun to me. I'm not sure if this is just how it is or what. You don't know how to read pressure signs on the brass, and you go home thinking, okay, well, I must have a really fast barrel because I'm 150 feet a second over the Hornady manual. When in reality, you're starting with a thicker piece of brass. So the amount of space in the case is less. And then let's say maybe you have a rough barrel. Now, a Browning's probably not a great example, but let's say it was a Savage where there's a lot of tooling marks in the barrel. Not smooth, very rough, accumulates fouling really fast. And as you add fouling, you're also going to increase resistance. So that's what this is about. It's about combustion space and resistance. So if we have a finite amount of combustion space, meaning the piece of brass, and then we have the barrel itself, not all barrels are created equal. So if it's supposed to be a 270 barrel, that means that the hole in the barrel should be 270 and the groove depth should be 277. Well, there's nothing saying the barrel's exactly 270. It might be 272, it might be 271, might be 269. Well, that's going to increase or decrease the amount of resistance of the bullet trying to go down the barrel. It also increases or decreases the amount of volume that powder has to burn in. So it has not just the piece of brass itself, but it also has the whole length of the barrel at whatever diameter it is. That's combustion space as well. So we have to factor that in too. So now let's say you have a rough barrel that has a lot of resistance, and let's say maybe it's a little tight, plus you have thicker brass that has less capacity than what Hornady used. Bang, you're 150 feet a second faster. You're starting with less space, you're putting the same amount of energy, you're shooting it down a tighter tube that might be rough and increases the drag. That's going to equal velocity. So what we need to remember is that pressure equals velocity. There's no way around that. You can't get the velocity without the pressure, and vice versa. You can't hit pressure without velocity. So that's the, let's say, constricted situation where it's a tight, we'll call it a tight situation. We got tight brass because it's thicker. We got a tight barrel. There's a lot of fouling in there, which is further restricting it. Now we'll go to the other end. So let's say, you hit Hornady's max charge of 57 grains of H4831 shortcut, and you're at 3,200 feet a second in the Browning. Now we go to the Tikka, and let's say we're using Hornady's brass instead of Nosler or Norma. Now you're using the same brass they did, and you have a Tikka, which is a hammer forged barrel. So they're like mirror smooth. And let's say maybe it's a little on the big side. So instead of being 270, it's 271 or 272. You don't know because you don't have a pin gauge to check it. And you do the same thing. You load up that same ladder test and you go out and test it. First charge weight is supposed to be 2950 and you're at 2820. You're 130 feet a second below what the book said. You work your way up, same thing. You get to Hornady's max charge, and instead of 3,200 or 3,100 feet per second, you're at 2,980. You're 120 feet a second under the max. And you're like, you're all let down because you bought a rifle with a little bit shorter barrel than you really wanted because you were maybe going to use your suppressor or whatever. So like you were already worried about being let down by the velocity you're going to get. And now over and above that, it's another 120 feet a second slower. And you throw your hands up and go, well, it's a Tikka. They're known to be slow. Tikka barrels are slow. That's what the internet told me.
That's
when
what
in
everyone tells
reality,
me.
yeah, why don't you comment on that? Because you see that more than I do.
Right.
Perusing the internet, like you follow this stuff more.
Sure. I'll give you my example of a Tikka that's in a 7 PRC. That's a double me, right?
Yeah.
I loaded up this Tikka, which we know, let's call it, instead of slow and fast, we could call it tight and loose. Is that okay?
Loose. Let's say the Tikka's loose and the Browning was tight. Those circumstances.
Most guys, if you're following the load data to a T, it's very likely, especially if you're shooting a Tikka, you're not going to get the velocities with that specific charge weight that Hornady is saying you're going to get, because they're using a tighter barrel. This is what I found. I shot a 24-inch barrel Tikka 7 PRC with 180 ELDM. I easily got the velocity that everyone covets, that 2950 to 3000 for a 180 grain.
At the very top.
It took 2 more grains of powder, but the pressure was right. The pressure was the same. Right. So I hit pressure right where Hornady said I would hit pressure, or GRT would say I'd hit pressure. It's just I'm maybe 2.5 grains more than what Hornady said I would be at.
Right. And that's the difference. That's the key point there, is that we're taught when we learn this hobby, don't go over book max. Like whatever the max is in the book, don't go over. And that's because we don't really have a good way to read it, and reading pressure signs on brass can be subjective, and we don't have pressure testing tools. But now with things that we have like Gordon's reloading tool and quick load and programs like that, we can simulate these things and try to get an idea of what our real max is. And that's the class I was talking about earlier that I'm going to be doing on Patreon for tiers 2 and 3, is that I'm going to do a 2-hour deep dive on showing you guys how to walk through that program through Gordon's reloading tool, what inputs matter, what to look for, how to get the most out of it, and what that program can give you that's really solid data. So when you go out and test, you know what your real ceiling is, because a manual isn't necessarily going to give you that. And one thing we left out as a baseline, Hornady's test barrels are all made by Bartline. So they're using tier 1 cut rifled barrels for all of their test rifles that are also minimum spec. So the barrel has to be as tight as possible, or Hornady doesn't want it. So now they have a super tight tier 1 match grade barrel that they're doing all their pressure testing on. And they're using Hornady brass, which is on the thin side, so it has higher capacity. And they're testing in a lab under their conditions with powder that is probably kept at the perfect, climate, perfect humidity, and then you take your factory gun. What are the odds that your factory barrel is as tight as a minimum spec Bartline? Let's start there. Slim and none.
Yeah.
And then it's a Tikka, so it's hammer forged, which means it shines like a mirror on the inside, so it's perfectly smooth, which means it is slippery. And it's going to provide less resistance, less drag than a button rifle barrel. So that means for that finite amount of energy that you put in the case, it's going to produce less velocity because there's less resistance for the bullet to get out of the gun. And that's why Tikkas are slow. So the reality of it is, it's not that they're actually slow. It's that given the circumstances and what I just explained, the fact that the barrel might be a little loose and it's really smooth, when you get up to Hornady's max charge and you're 120 feet a second slow, that means that you're not at max pressure, because it's a 1-to-1 relationship. So if you're 120 feet per second under the max velocity that's in the manual, that means you're probably only at like 57,000 PSI.
Yeah.
You got 8,000 to go. And that's the situation you were in, where you found the ceiling. You got to the max that Hornady stated for velocity, but you needed another 2.5 grains to get there. Right. And most people are just too nervous to go 2.5 grains over the book. So they stop and they surrender to the fact that I have a slow barrel, when in reality, there's no such thing. And going back to your question at the beginning, if both guns are run at 65,000 psi, they're both going to produce the same velocity, but the charge weight will be different.
Right.
And if that charge weight is higher than what's in the book and you never go up and find it, you're never going to know. You're just going to surrender to the fact that you have a slow barrel when in reality they don't exist.
Now, I think this misconception is valid especially if all you ever do is shoot factory ammo, right? So
Right.
you love your Federal Terminal Ascent factory ammo load, and you got that Browning and that Tikka. Just looking at a glance, well, yeah, my Browning's much faster. And with that factory ammo, I understand that loads change, but for the most part, they're putting the same amount of power for each box of ammo. So for the life of your barrel, if you're ever going to shoot factory ammo, there absolutely is slow and fast barrels. You just don't know why it's slow or it's fast.
Right. And the truth of the matter is that you have those two guns side by side. You have one box of ammo. You run 10 rounds in this gun, 10 rounds in that gun. You get an average velocity. They're different. Well, we know the ammo is the same because it came out of the same box. We know the brass is the same, the bullet, the powder charge, the primer. We know it's all the same. So what's different that's making them one faster, one slower? It's the conditions of the barrel.
Right.
It's the actual exact diameter of the barrel, how smooth it is, all of that stuff. It's how much resistance is presented by the barrel, which then causes a certain amount of pressure to be created by the finite amount of energy that's in the same rounds that generates a velocity. It's got nothing to do with, is the barrel fast or slow? It's how tight or loose is it that's generating a certain amount of velocity from the finite amount of energy you put in the case.
Right. 3 years ago, if you would have asked me if there's slow and fast barrels, I would have absolutely said 100%. All of my Weatherby rifles are extremely fast. And it's kind of why I went towards using GRT, because the books were just completely off. I can't get anywhere close in my 300 Weatherby and my 340, my 257. I can't get anywhere close to book max. I will be 200 feet per second faster.
Right. And you have a couple things going on there. So you not only have the conditions of the barrel, but you're using Weatherby brass, which for a long time was made by Norma.
Yeah.
So it's super thick. So you might have, in a 300 Weatherby, you might have 3 grains less capacity than if you were using Hornady brass.
Yeah.
And just 1 grain can generate 3,000 to 4,000 psi. So now we're talking 3 grains. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you get to the middle of Hornady's data and you're at max.
Right. So looking at Nosler's data with IMR 7828 SSC with the 180 AccuBond, I was loading those, and I was loading 83 grains. And according to Nosler, I should have been right at 3,100. I was getting 3,300 and faster. And obviously pretty bad pressure, because max is 3,240 with that powder. I just was oh, cool, I have a fast barrel.
Yeah. When in reality, that's turning your brass into single use. You don't have a fast barrel.
You're about 3 or 4 shots.
Yeah, you're over 70,000 psi, and the brass is going to go in the trash. Yeah. So and I get why people get nervous about this. It's just, this is, like you said, for factory ammo, it's a big deal because you can't do anything to change it. And if you're a hand loader, it's beat into our head. Don't go over book max. Don't go over book max. And if you're not experienced at looking for pressure signs and you're not brave enough to go over that, you're never going to know. You're never going to find what the real ceiling is. Not that I would invite people to do this, but if you are brave enough to do that and decide to do it on your own, you're going to find that you can still get the same velocity as everybody else with your Tikka. It's just going to take you more powder to get there because the barrel's smooth and maybe a little bit loose. So you need more to get to the same number. That's not going to hurt anything. You're going to burn a little more powder in the life of that gun versus something else, but you can still get the same speeds.
I got 3,000 feet per second with a 180 ELDM and a 7 PRC and a Tikka. Now, was it over pressure? Yes, because that's just is. Your max is around 2960. But I was trying to prove a point. Even in a Tikka, you can get those fast velocities.
Right. And if you took that same gun that you hit 3,000 feet a second and you just bought a box of Hornady factory ammo and stuck it in there, it'd be high 27s, 2,800. It'd be 200 feet a second slower.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the pressure. I mean, the pressure is why it's slower. It doesn't mean that you can't get to 3,000. It just means that for what they loaded and what they put in the box, you're not going to get there in a Tikka.
And for you guys that own the same cartridge in different rifles, a pet load in an older rifle is most likely not going to work, especially if you're shooting.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Since we're on the subject, we're only 20 minutes in. Let's cover that.
Can I just give you a few examples? I have a good friend
please do.
With that Tikka, by the way. Okay, he has that Tikka 7 PRC, and he has his pet load with H4831 SC and a 180 ELDM going 2875. He just bought a Seekins with a 26-inch barrel. I was asking him, like, what's your plans? He's like, I'm going to try my pet load. I was like, be careful. That's going to be over pressure. And guess what? It was over pressure in his new gun because of that tight loose.
Right. So he had worked it up in a Tikka and found where it shot. And that would have been, let's say, 57,000 PSI in a Tikka. He sticks it in a Seekins. Now it's over 65. Just due to the barrel condition.
Like crap. Yeah.
It shoots terrible, and because now you're in a completely different timing node, as far as the harmonics, and you're way over pressure, and generally as you get over pressure, things don't shoot very well anyway. So that's a thing. You can't just stick a pet load. And you and I have talked about this. I think I'm going to take the words out of your mouth. That's why when guys ask what my load is, I don't tell them, because it's meaningless.
Right.
Because one, my load might not be safe in your gun due to what we just talked about. But two, even if it is safe, the odds that you have the exact same circumstances of your barrel as I do, and your harmonic node is going to be in the same place and it's actually going to shoot well in your gun, are almost zero.
It's true.
But my data is completely useless for you. Like, I can tell you this powder shoots good. Like if you have a 7 PRC and a whatever bullet, Hodgdon 4831 SC is going to shoot well.
Yeah.
But what charge weight? I mean, that's
you got to
figure that out on your own. Yeah. I can't help you.
Yeah. I watched another person. I'm not going to name him, Mr. N170, but he I know who he had an older rifle. I'm not going to say the cartridge. And then he got a newer rifle, same cartridge, same barrel length, and he again decided to put his pet loads from the old rifle, and it shot like crap, and it was like 120 feet per second slower.
So he wasn't in an unsafe condition.
No, that's good.
But it shot terrible.
It shot terrible, and it shot really slow. Guys, when you get a new gun, you're going to have to just do brand new load work for it.
Yep. They're all unicorns. You got to start over.
Yeah.
I wish it was simpler than that, but it's not. And that's part of shameless plug. That's part of what I'm teaching on my Patreon, is that this stuff is so nuanced. I wish it was simple. But with the tens of thousands of dollars I've spent on this, I can tell you it's not. It's very complicated, and there's so much to it, and so many different ways you can get tripped up and get frustrated. It can make you want to quit, especially if you've been trying really hard to get things going and do better. There's so many of these little things that, and we talked about this, a lot of guys that have YouTube channels, they're just as lost as you are. Austin and I laugh about that. Don't think that they're some expert just because they have a YouTube channel.
And that applies to me too.
Place you are.
I'm still learning. I am still learning. So don't come across as like me being way higher than everyone else. I'm not. I'm just trying to learn and get better.
Right. And you're making a ton of progress, but even 2-3 years ago, you were fairly lost. Like you're saying, when you try to run up Nosler's data, and you're like, well, it says I'm not at the max yet, but my brass is like coming out hard, and it's hard to lift the bolt, and I'm 200 feet a second over the book, and you don't know any better, and that's where a lot of the guys that are making videos are. They don't know any better either. They're just trying to take you along for the ride. So be careful where you get your information, and Don't just do something because you saw somebody on the internet do it. You have to treat your weapon as unique and be safe, work up slow, but and sometimes you can go over what the max is in the book, but you have to be careful about it and know what to look for, know what you're doing, but don't think you have a slow or fast barrel, because you don't. You either are running over pressure or you're running under pressure. It's got nothing to do with fast or slow barrel.
Yes. 100%. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this idea of tight and loose barrels, not fast and slow barrels. But thanks again, Tim, for coming on. I really enjoy these kind of talks. They're really fun. I hope to have you on next month. Maybe we can talk some cartridges. Like, what is Tim's go-to Western hunting elk cartridge? People love hearing about cartridges. So maybe that's something we'll have to do.
Yeah, anytime. These are fun. We can certainly do it once a month. I like doing these. It's a good time. And yeah, the book's open. Whatever you guys want to talk about. If you want to hear about cartridges, if you want my recommendations on, what cartridge for what species or whatever, I'm open to whatever you guys want to learn.
Great. Well, thanks again. Hope you guys have a great day.